Zilisch is hoping to return to Charlotte Motor Speedway, and Road America speaks about potentially returning to NASCAR. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them those really quickly. We're going to start by talking about 7-Eleven. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Saturday evening, the 7-Eleven is getting a lot of exposure this weekend. They got a lot of exposure during the NASCAR Cup Series race at Texas Motor Speedway with Kyle Busch, which they were sponsoring him this weekend at Texas, and they also got a lot of sponsorship exposure during the Formula One weekend in Miami as well. We'll talk about Miami Grand Prix a little bit later this week, but I think it's a massive deal to see 7-Eleven getting a ton of sponsorship. They've been involved in NASCAR quite a few years. You think about they sponsored Kyle Petty back in the 1980s. They had some association with the NASCAR in the 1990s as well, and it's been pretty cool to see that a 7-Eleven has been making a comeback in return to the sport. It's unknown if they are going to sponsor Kyle Busch in more races this year. We could see them sponsor more races down the road, but I think it's awesome to see 7-Eleven get that exposure that I think they deserve to be in the sport. I think it's great to see they're sponsoring Kyle Busch. Hopefully they'll sponsor him in more races this year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cory Heim. As Cory Heim, of course, won the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Texas Motor Speedway this past Friday. This was his 14th career Truck Series win. He is now the youngest driver in Truck Series history to reach that feat. He beat a feat that Kyle Busch had reached, which he was 24 years old at the time. Cory Heim, we know, kind of got a little bit of a controversial win during the truck race at Texas, but we know Cory Heim is fantastic in the Craftsman Truck Series. Many people like myself have said that Cory Heim should probably move up to the NASCAR Xfinity or even the Cup Series at this point, so I think he's proven himself that he's ready to make that jump up the Cup. He's been really good this year in trucks. He should honestly have more wins up at this point this year, but I think it's pretty incredible to see the accomplishments that he's had so far in 2025. He's, of course, going to make his first Cup Series start this weekend at Kansas Speedway, which is going to be really exciting, but I'm excited for that. But it's pretty impressive to see that he continues to bank numbers and gets his 14th truck win. Really exciting stuff overall, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Indianapolis 500. As I believe it was on Friday or Saturday, the first Indy500 Promo, or the new Indy500 Promo, was officially revealed for the 2025 Indianapolis 500. This course is going to be the first year that Fox has ever televised the Indianapolis 500, and I gotta say they have been doing a ton of promotion. And with the Indy 500 only being about 3 or 4 weeks away from now at this point, you're going to start seeing a lot more promotion for the Indianapolis 500. I think this honestly is a really good promo piece that they've decided to go with, and I think they did a fantastic job. Say what you want to say about the coverage IndyCar's had, which I think their coverage has honestly been solid, all things considered. I think it's a pretty big deal, and I think it's awesome to see that the Indy 500 is getting the exposure it deserves. I do think the ratings are actually going to be higher for Fox's coverage of the Indy 500 than it was for NBC because of the promotion, but I do think that the promotion has been good, and I do love the app that they use. I think it's actually really, really good, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Miami Grand Prix. As it was announced on Friday afternoon that the Miami Grand Prix has officially extended their contract with Formula One through 2041. Originally, the contract was only supposed to go through, I believe, 2031, but they have now extended it 10 years. This is now, I believe, one of the longest extended contracts we have seen in Formula One currently at the moment. And that's a very long time deal because the Miami Grand Prix has only been around now for the last 3 or 4 years. To be honest, I would have thought maybe they would have only gone to like 2035 or 2036. I didn't think they would go as far as 2041. I do get they bring a lot of money in for that event, but I think if they're going to have the Miami Grand Prix going on long term, I do think they're going to have to eventually change up the event because right now I think the event's gone stale. The Formula One race from earlier today was not that good in my opinion, so I do think that they're going to have to change it up if they want the racing generally to be a lot better. But at the same time, I understand because they bring a lot of money in. We don't know the long-term future of the Las Vegas Grand Prix. I think their contract goes to like 2031 or 2032. But I think it's awesome to see that this event is getting extended. But I do think if they're going to keep it long-term, like I said, they're going to have to make some changes to the event going forward. Otherwise, they could lose the event in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. As it was announced on Friday that Kevin Harvick is officially inducted into the Texas Motorsports Hall of Fame and inducted into the Texas Sports Hall of Fame as well. Kevin Harvick, of course, being inducted because, one, he won 60 career NASCAR Cup Series races, but also because he won a lot of races at Texas Motor Speedway. He won there in 2019. He won there, I believe, in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. I think he won there back in 2018, even though it was controversial. And he also won there in 2017 as well. Kevin Harvick's always been good at Texas Motor Speedway and has won there quite a bit and has always been successful, but he's also had a lot of success at Texas-type tracks as well. It's a massive deal for Kevin Harvick. Congratulations to him on getting inducted into the Texas Motorsports Hall of Fame. He's earned it, in my opinion, and getting inducted into the Texas Sports Hall of Fame is a pretty big accomplishment and deal. Congratulations, Harvick, on getting inducted. I think that's a really big deal and happy for him to get inducted into the Texas Hall of Fame for sports. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Patrick Emerling. As it was officially confirmed on Friday afternoon that Patrick Emerling will drive the number 75 for Henderson Motorsports in 2 weeks at North Wilkesboro. This is going to be the first time that Patrick Emerling has been in a decent car or decent truck. So far, Patrick Emerling, when it comes to racing in NASCAR's top competitions, he's generally racing the Xfinity Series, but he's never been in good equipment. He's driven for his own team, Emerling Gase Motorsports, and of course has been driving for SS Greenlight Racing throughout the year. Patrick is honestly, when you look at his modified numbers, though, he has been very, very good in the modified series. So I think this actually is a really good opportunity. Now, I don't expect Patrick Emerling to take that truck in North Wilkesboro and go out there and win, but I can honestly see him doing a very good job to convince some sponsors to give him a chance and opportunity with a really, really good car or a really, really good truck. And this may not be the only start we see Patrick in that truck. We could see him make more starts with Henderson or another really, really good team. But I think this is a really awesome deal nonetheless for Patrick. I think he's earned this right, an opportunity to get into a top car. I think he is a very talented race car driver. He's done a really good job at times. He's been decent in the equipment that he's been in. So I think it's a well-earned and well-right opportunity. Congratulations to him on getting the opportunity to run with Henderson Motorsports in North Wilkesboro next week. I think that's some really exciting and fun stuff overall. And I think it's pretty cool to see that for sure. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the NASCAR EV. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday morning that David Reagan kind of talked a little bit about the future of the NASCAR EV. And David Reagan said, I think that they wouldn't be spending the money and the time just for AM. I think it's only a matter of time before you see it on the racetrack. You wouldn't see it just for fun. They're going to probably bring it on the racetrack in the future. When I heard that comment, I was definitely a little bit disappointed. Now, obviously, we don't even know what the future of the EV vehicles are going to look like with some of the stuff that's going on with the government. If they are going to have some sort of series for the NASCAR EV car down the road, I think it needs to be its own separate series. I don't want to see it come in and replace a series. Now, again, I don't think it's going to be ready for at least the next couple of years. I certainly think because of where the grid is currently at the moment, I just don't think that there is enough on the grid at the moment to have this car out there. That's why NASCAR has got this electric car, which I think NASCAR is being smart by not just going ahead and running an electric car. I think it's very, very important that they go ahead and try different things. They're looking at sustainable fuels. They're looking at hydrogen type of cars, perhaps. They're looking at a lot of different things. And even the hybrid system, they're even looking to maybe bring in to NASCAR in the future as well, even though we've seen that in IndyCar, and it really hasn't worked for the racing in IndyCar. So if they are going to down the road go toward the EV, I think it should be its own series. It could attract some of those new manufacturers like Dodge, perhaps, who is interested in coming back to NASCAR, and it sounds like they're going to be coming back in 2026. But I think this EV could definitely be very, very important down the road. But I think as of right now, NASCAR is playing it smart. They're not jumping into it, which is the smartest thing that they could obviously do, because they don't want to jump the gun on something like this, especially down the road. So the smartest thing they can do is play it safe currently at the moment. I think the EV, there's definitely some potential future for the car, but I think as of right now, they need to take their time with it and not jump the gun on it, because obviously if they jump the gun, it could definitely not the best thing for the sport going forward. Let's not jump the gun on this NASCAR. Let's play smart. I think they will do a lot better when it comes to not jumping the gun on things like this going forward. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Iowa Speedway. It was reported by John Newby on Friday that the state of Iowa has unanimously passed a bill that protects established racetracks from legal claims when it comes to noise and sound claims as well when it comes to legal complaints about that. This is something that has been happening across the country. There is a lot of racetracks that have had to close in recent years. Irwindale Speedway, which have been around for a very, very long time, closed in the off-season. There, of course, have been some complaints about tracks like the National Fairgrounds, which, of course, a lot of people in the Nash area do support. But there's also people like Jason Bergeron, I believe, who do not support the National Fairgrounds. And there's a lot of people who do want the soccer stadium, and they've been trying to get rid of the National Fairgrounds. And you think about some of the stuff that's also been going on with Laguna Seca as well. There's been a big issue with the sound for some people that live in the area, even though people moved into that area. And I think that's what Iowa Speedway and the state of Iowa is looking at, saying, look, you made the decision to move out to a racetrack. If you weren't born here and if you moved to this area, you should have been prepared and you should know that there's a racetrack there. Iowa Speedway has been there for about 20 years at this point. It got built up in 2006. It has been there for 20 years. I get it's not as long as the National Fairgrounds, but still, Iowa brings a lot to the economy. It brings a lot to the people. And a lot of people generally love the Iowa Speedway. So I think that them supporting this event overall is a really big deal. Iowa Speedway, there was a lot of uncertainty about this track a few years ago. To see that Iowa Speedway continues to get the support it gets from the government, I think is actually a really, really big deal. And I think it's pretty awesome to see that they are getting the support that I do think they deserve. So I'm really happy about that. I think that's a big win for the track itself. I think it's a really big win for the sport as well. And nonetheless, I think it's pretty awesome and great to see that Iowa Speedway is getting the support that it does clearly deserve. And I'm glad to see it is getting that support because I think Iowa Speedway is a good track. Again, IndyCar has not put on the best racing at that track since the reconfiguration happened. But I will say, or the repave, I should say. But I do think Iowa Speedway brings a lot, and it brings a lot to the economy. And I think it's a very important track, not just for the people that support it, but also for the people in the government as well when it comes to the money as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Frankie Munz. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race on Friday night, you probably heard a massive all-time rant from Frankie Munz. Frankie Munz, with around 20-25 laps to go, was actually having probably one of his best truck runs he had ever had. He was actually showing some pretty decent speed, was running in the top 20 in the early portion of the race, didn't lose a lot of ground, and was falling back, was actually running around the top 5, then he had to come down pit road for his final pit stop. And going into turn number 1, Frankie Munz would get way high up on the racetrack, have a flat tire, and hit the outside wall. That, of course, would bring out the caution because there was debris on the racetrack. Now, Frankie Munz, after the race concluded or after he got out of his truck, you could hear on his radio that he was super mad and really angry. Now, he was, of course, being interviewed by people from Front Stretch and many media reporters in the industry about why he was so mad on the radio. He felt like he was really, really frustrated about what happened in that situation. He basically said, just let me wreck somebody. Let me be at fault for something like this. Let me be at fault for whatever happens on the track. I don't like basically having it where things are out of my control and that are not at my fault. And I understand Frankie's frustration. Frankie Munz is driving for one of the slowest teams in the Craftsman Truck Series. No disrespect to Josh Rayum and the Rayum brothers. I think that organization has put a lot into this series, and they have done some good things for the sport. I'm not questioning that. But they're not one of the fastest teams in the field. They're one of the backmarker teams. They generally don't have the most speed. Now, I think at points this year, they have shown some decent pace and shown some decent speed. But they've not been setting the world on fire when it comes to the pace they do bring to the racetrack. So for Frankie, we all knew coming into this year that Frankie Munz was probably going to struggle quite a bit. We all just kind of expected that. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. We all kind of thought that coming into the year that Frankie was probably not going to be a major factor in that truck. That being said, I know Frankie has definitely wanted to do a much better job out there. I know he wants to be very, very competitive. I just hope for Frankie he can get his head on straight. I know this year has been frustrating for him. He wants to do really, really good, but he's not in the best equipment out there. So for Frankie, I really hope that he's okay. It sounded like after the race, and I believe yesterday he texted or put on his Twitter page or X page that he was definitely fine after the race had concluded, and he's getting his head on straight and ready to go. He's got a lot of stuff going on at the moment right now. To me, I hope for Frankie, he's okay, and he's not mad about what happened at that point. I think the focus now is to this week at Kansas. Hopefully can run really well and show some good stuff. So I think Frankie does have some talent, but there's been a lot of bad luck for him so far this year. Hope things can turn around for him so he can definitely have the luck that he deserves, and I hope he can get that luck going forward into the future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ronnie Chillers. Now, Ronnie Chillers was this past weekend at the most recent Cars Tour event and doing some late model racing and was actually helping out Keelan Harvick as well, as he was working on Keelan Harvick's car and was the crew chief, I believe, for Landon Lewis as well, who is part of the Kevin Harvick Incorporated team. Now, he spoke a lot of Keelan Harvick in a very positive light. He said, of course, he was helping out his good friend Kevin Harvick, and that's why he was not at the NASCAR track, because he was helping out Keelan Harvick and Kevin Harvick in a way. And, of course, Ronnie Chillers did praise Landon Lewis for his talent in that video, and he also did praise Keelan Harvick as well. Now, there was also a big question about his future in NASCAR, and he really never ended up responding about what his future is going to look like in NASCAR going forward. Ronnie Chillers will be on the Door Bumper Clear podcast later today, so he'll probably reveal some information on that very, very soon. He did say recently that he does want to return to being a crew chief in the NASCAR Cup Series. That is still his lifetime goal. He apparently had an opportunity in the offseason to go over and work at Richard Childress Racing, and maybe as someone as a higher up, but that unfortunately got denied for him because of the fact he didn't want to go and be a competition side. He wanted to be working as someone that was doing the stuff and making the decisions for the team themselves. And I completely respect that from Ronnie Chillers' side, because Ronnie Chillers, in my opinion, is someone that, even though he's not been as strong in the next-gen car as a crew chief, he is still someone that is going to bring a lot to the table if you bring him into the team. So I think for Ronnie Chillers, he does deserve an opportunity and a chance to be a crew chief in the sport. And I really hope he does get that chance and opportunity to come back to NASCAR in the future and be a crew chief. He's really good at what he does. I get he's not won as many races, but he worked with Kevin Harvick, who was starting to age, and also at Stewart Racing, where the team was starting to fall off near the end of the time, and he still got multiple wins with Kevin Harvick. There were a few times last year with Josh Berry where I do think that Ronnie and Josh were doing a really good job with the stuff that they had, despite all the stuff and uncertainty that was happening behind the scenes for that team. But I do think for Ronnie, I hope he does get the opportunity to come back and be a crew chief. Because even though, like I said, he wasn't as strong the last couple of years, once we got to the Gen 7 car, the next-gen car, I think Ronnie is still really good at what he does. And to me, I hope he gets that said chance and opportunity to be a crew chief once again. He's really good at it. He should be a crew chief. And again, I hope he does get that chance and opportunity to be a crew chief once again in Cup. Just saying, if you want a crew chief for Chase Elliott at this point and take over for Alan Gustafson, that might not be a bad decision at this point, even though I still think Alan Gustafson is a good crew chief. I think for Ronnie, if he got the opportunity to work with Chase, I think there'd be a lot of success, and I think things would go the way forward. We'll have to see if Ronnie does come back, but it sounds like there's a chance he might come back in the future. We'll have to wait and see what happens, though, in regards to that in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story on today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR and Fox. Now, we're not going to talk about the coverage from the NASCAR Cup Series, because I got to say the coverage for the Cup Series race at Texas, they of course had to change with Artie Kepner going away this past week to go work with ESPN, and I do got to say, it wasn't completely horrendous. They didn't do a fantastic job, but I feel like it's been better than prior weeks. But let's go back to the Craftsman Truck Series race at Texas Motor Speedway and what happened at the end of the event. So one of the later race restarts of the event, Corey Heim, of course, had dominated the Craftsman Truck Series race. You had Corey Heim on the inside, Ben Rose on the outside, and Raj Krupp starting in third position. Going into turn number one, Corey Heim did not get the best restart, and he lost a ton of ground going into turn number one, went up the track, kind of put Ben Rhodes up the track a little bit, unintentionally, of course. And then, of course, going down the back straightaway, Raj Krupp made a move to the inside. But there was a caution that would come out for debris on the front stretch, thanks to Matt Mills, who had clipped the grass on one of the late race restarts. Now, normally, they'd be looking at the video, and a lot of times when it comes to video, especially at the end of the race, they go by the video. But for NASCAR, for whatever reason, unless it's like the white flag, they go by the timing loops. Now, when you look at the timing loops, Corey Heim, of course, would be the race leader. But Fox, for whatever reason, never really mentioned that during the broadcast, which I did not completely understand because obviously the timing loops is a thing. Now, personally, I think it should be by the video. We are now in 2025. I get timing loops are very, very important, but we are in an updated time and age where we can go ahead and go by video. And when you take a look at the video here, Roger Krupp should be the leader of this race. I don't completely understand why Roger Krupp was not the leader. I think he should have been the leader at the caution, but because of where the timing loops are, I guess that meant that Corey Heim was the leader and Raja wasn't the leader and restarted in third. Now, honestly, Corey Heim probably should have still won the race regardless because Corey Heim was still very good in this race and he had the fastest truck in the event. There's no denying that. There's no question on that. But I do personally think that Fox 1 has got to do a better job of explaining things. It seemed like no one knew what was going on. Joe Logano kind of hit the nail right on the head. It seemed like Fox did not know what they were doing throughout the broadcast, which is nothing uncommon at this point. So I think Fox has been doing a terrible job with their coverage in recent years. To me, though, I'm not shocked with their lack of unknowing of what is going on during these broadcasts at this point. They've got to do a better job, but I also think there need to be changes to some of the procedures going forward. Again, we're in 2025. We're not in 1993 with timing loops. We can change things up. We can go by video evidence, and I think it was clear as day that Raja probably should have been the leader, but at the same time, I do think the best truck won, so there's nothing negative toward that at this point, but I do think they could have done a better job with some of the explanations, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we have talked a lot about Kyle Busch on the channel over this past week. And a big reason why we're talking about Kyle Busch once again is something kind of touched on Friday. And it was about Kyle Busch, of course, turning 40 years old. Kyle Busch, I believe it was on Friday, if I'm not mistaken, Kyle Busch would end up turning 40 years old. And once you get to that 40-year-old age, you kind of start thinking about when you may retire from the sport. And Kyle Busch kind of reflected on turning 40 years old in a video that Zach Serenello kind of put together on his page as well. A really good article that I definitely suggest going and checking out. In that video, you did see Joe Gibbs, and you saw a lot of people from Joe Gibbs Racing as well. But you did not see a lot of people from Richard Childress Racing. I do think a big reason for that is because, one, Kyle Busch had a ton of success at Joe Gibbs Racing. I believe he is the second winningest driver in Joe Gibbs Racing history. Denny Hamlin recently surpassed him as the winningest driver in Joe Gibbs Racing history. And he's also won the tie for the most championships for the team. Tony Stewart got 2 championships in 2002 and 2005. And, of course, Kyle Busch won the championship in 2015 and also 2019. Kyle Busch has had a lot of success in this sport and is someone that he wants to continue long term. Now, he did say in that video he's not planning to retire currently at the moment, and he feels like he does have a few years where he can still definitely perform. Now, for the last couple of years or so, I do think performance for Kyle Busch has gone down. I do think there's a few reasons for that. Number one, Kyle Busch is a little bit older, but historically, when you get up to the age that Kyle Busch is, you kind of start going toward your peak. It hasn't been seen to be the case for some drivers, though, once you get to that 40-year age, but I also do think it's the equipment. Now, I will say RCR, they have looked solid. In fact, Kyle Busch ran really solid near the end of the race before he spun out at Texas, where he was actually up in third position, had a chance and opportunity to go to victory lane. Of course, did not end up winning the race. But I do think for Kyle Busch, I think he still wants to be very, very competitive. Now, obviously, there is a lot of talk about whether Kyle Busch is still going to be with this team at the end of this year. I've already predicted multiple times on this channel that I do think Kyle Busch is still going to be with Rich Schultz Racing past this year because I don't really think there's a lot of good options out there currently at the moment. And I do think a lot of these teams are going to be looking for funded drivers. You think about 23XI. All 3 drivers are under contract with 23XI Racing through the 2026 year, if I believe. Bubba's through 26, Reddick's through, I believe, 27 or 28. And I think Riley Herbst has a big-time deal because of the fact that his family's bringing the charter over there with them. But I do think for Kyle, he wants to stay with RCR. The only option I think out there is Spire, and I know maybe you can look at Justin Haley, whether he should stay with the team or not past this year, but from what I know, Hendrick Motorsports is a massive fan of Justin Haley. So I don't think they're going to be getting rid of Justin Haley. So I think he really wants to make this work at RCR. And again, I do think this team's been showing a little bit more speed, but they haven't been exceptional. So I think for Kyle Busch, he stays with RCR past this year, but I don't know how much longer Kyle Busch is going to race in the sport. I predict he will be around at least probably till the end of the decade. I think 2029, 2030 could be the time because once Brexton turns 16, he's eligible to run in the Truck Series. Kyle said publicly he does want to race against his son, and I do think there's a chance that that could happen down the road, and I hope it does happen because I want to see Kyle Busch get the chance and opportunity to race against his son in the Truck Series especially. We'll see if that does happen down the road for Kyle Busch. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Jr. Now, earlier this week, there was a big quote that kind of came out from Dale Jr. that kind of went under the radar about the playoff format and what the playoff format could look like in NASCAR for 2026. There, of course, is a lot of talk and conversation about what the playoff format is going to look like for 2026 and what changes could end up being made for 2026. But one thing that actually got posted, I believe, on the Dirty Mo Media X page this past week on Friday is the fact that Dale Jr. spoke about the possibility and talked a little bit about the playoff format as well. And he says he feels like with this current playoff format that we have right now, he feels like there is a lack of urgency. He mentions the fact that Denny Hamlin, of course, think he fell out of the race at Talladega or a race recently, or someone could be up in the points and they have a bad week, but it doesn't feel like that they basically feel any way bad toward it. They don't get angry or upset about it, and it doesn't feel like it's a big deal when someone falls out of the race nowadays. Why? Because if you win one race in the sport, you can basically not have as much urgency. Dale Jr. is 100% right about that. Now, say what you want to say about the full season in the Winston Cup format that we had for many years, but you always felt that there was a sense of urgency. I wasn't around at that time, but from people who said that were fans back then, they say there definitely was a sense of urgency. And there was a lot of urgency when it comes to that. I think with this current playoff format right now, all of it is about is winning at the moment. It's not about getting those good finishes anymore. And I get that winning should matter a lot, but I feel like winning has taken a majority of what is the most important thing. And I think that you need to have the possibility of, yes, making winning very, very important, but you also need to have consistency as a factor as well. That's why a lot of people like myself were not very happy with Joey Logano winning the championship last year, because Joey Logano should have been nowhere near shape or form had an opportunity to win the championship last year. Logano was terrible all around last year when you look at his numbers. And yes, he did win today at Texas Motor Speedway, and he did what he had to do to win. But Joey Logano has not been as strong in recent years. And I think for Logano winning the championship, it just hurts legitimacy of the sport. If we are going to have a format, I would love to go back to the full season format. Believe me, but I don't think NASCAR is going to go back to the full season format. So I think the compromise is you go back to the original chase format from 2004 to 2007, or maybe do the format Dale Jr. has where you only have 4 drivers competing for championship in maybe 4 races and don't have any playoffs at all outside of that. That might be an easier way to go with it, but I do think that the original chase format and you don't have winning your end being the most important thing, and also if you want to make winning matter a lot more, which is one of the issues the Winston Cup format had, you just award more points to the winner. That's one of the things that a lot of people contend with is, well, the winner didn't get a lot of points and more points. Well, that could have been a very easy solution, and we probably wouldn't have had the winning format because people complained about Matt Kenseth winning the championship in 2003, but if you give winning more emphasis, Ryan Newman probably wins the championship if you put a lot more stock into winning races. To me, when I think about this, when Dale Jr. says this, I think he is speaking a lot of facts, and I think he is definitely speaking a lot of truth on this, because I think this current playoff format does not have a major sense of urgency, in my opinion, and I do think that urgency should be a very, very important factor. So I really hope down the road the NASCAR is looking to make changes to try to make it matter a lot more, because again, I think this current playoff format that we have right now is clear as day is not working. Ratings for every championship race have gone down every year, and every year the playoffs have come around, the ratings have gone down. So I think if we go back to somewhat of like a chase format where he had its own brand and its own identity, I do think that it definitely could still be a really, really big deal, and I think the championship would matter a lot more, and we get some of that legitimacy back. But until those changes are made, I think a lot of legitimacy of the sport is definitely going to be gone. So I really hope some changes are made to put more legitimacy back in the sport, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. We're just going to have to wait and see if NASCAR does decide to go ahead and make those changes in the offseason to try to make the playoffs a lot more important going forward. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tony Stewart. Now, earlier this week on Friday, Tony Stewart appeared on the Rubbings Racing podcast, which Barstool Sport does. And there was a major quote that came out from Tony Stewart that got a lot of people talking on social media. And this revolves around the legitimacy of the Daytona 500. And Tony Stewart basically said, I'm probably going to get crucified for saying this. But he says that the Daytona 500 doesn't mean as much as it did 15 to 20 years ago. he says that a lot of different people who probably should not have won the Daytona 500 have been able to win the Daytona 500 in recent years. He does clarify and say that he still thinks the Daytona 500 does hold a lot of weight still because it still is the Daytona 500, but he feels like that the Daytona 500 is lost a lot of weight as a massive and big event. And I do 100% agree with Tony Stewart on this. I do think the Daytona 500 is still a pretty big event, but I feel like in recent years, you've had a lot more drivers who don't have as much of a big career in the sport going out and win the Daytona 500. Now, that's nothing new in super speedway racing, right? You've had it from time to time, especially in the Daytona 500, where you get random winners winning races. Like Mario Andretti's only Cup win was the Daytona 500, but Mario Andretti, of course, is one of the greatest drivers. But think about in recent years, Trevor Bayne won the 2011 Daytona 500. Trevor Bayne's only career NASCAR Cup Series win. Jay McMurray had a pretty solid career in the sport, got 7 or 8 wins, a pretty good career if you ask me. Then for a while, you had guys like Matt Kenseth win the Daytona 500, one of the best of all time. Jimmy Johnson got a Daytona 500 in 2013. 2014, Junior won a second 500. 2015, Joe Logano's gone on to win 37 NASCAR Cup races. He did that. And then, of course, 2016, Denny Hamlin got 3 of the next 5 Daytona 500s. Then Kurt Busch won. But then 2018, Austin Dillon won the 500. 2021, Michael McDowell, good super speedway racer, but only 2 career Cup Series wins. He won the Daytona 500. 2022, Austin Cindric, who's got 3 career NASCAR Cup Series wins. He won the Daytona 500. 2023, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., 4 career NASCAR Cup Series wins. In this last 2 Daytona 500s that have ended because of wrecks, William Byron, who wasn't a major factor, a lot of those 500s, he's won the last 2 Daytona 500s. Now, I think Byron has been the exception in recent years because William Byron's won 15 or 16 NASCAR Cup races at this point and is probably going to win a championship in the next couple of years. But I think the 500's lost its luster. You don't have as many of those big superstars being created anymore. You don't have the big superstars winning all these super speedway races anymore. It's a lot of guys that, while they're good at super speedways, they're not guys that are going in there and competing for championships on a year-by-year basis for the most part, unless you're William Byron. I think that the 500 also gained some of its luster back this year with some of the teams that came in. You have Mark Truex Jr., who's never won the 500, who's a NASCAR Cup champion, make a one-off start, and he could make more starts down the road. He's interested in running the Daytona 500 once again. Elio Castroneves, 4-time Indy 500 champion. Shane Van Gisbergen, 3-time Supercar champion. Of course, we saw Junior Motorsports finally for the first time enter the Daytona 500 in Jimmy Johnson, who made the 500 with Legacy Motor Club. And Jimmy got a top 5 in the 500 this year. But I think what Tony Stewart is saying is that and it's absolutely true, is that the event has truly lost its luster. And I think you can make the 500 bigger once again. I think if we had unrestricted engines for qualifying, I think that'd be a big deal. I think not having locked-in spots for the Daytona 500 or going maybe back for the 500 like a top 30 rule or something like that, then maybe you could do that. And I think the urgency would go up for the 500. I think the 500 needs to be a big event. Look at the Indy 500, for example. The Indy 500 has people go home. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter if you're contending for a championship. If you get bumped, you get bumped. Granted, you could buy a ride to get in the Indy 500, but you can still get bumped from the event originally. So I think that is the simple way to go with it, is that you can get bumped from this event. It needs to happen. I think the 500, and you can still get bumped because you have more cars show up at this event than any other event. But I think the 500 has definitely lost some of its luster in recent years. And again, I still say to this day that it's still one of the biggest events every single year. But I think it has lost its luster in recent years especially. And I do think it can get it back. I would love to see it get it back on the schedule where the 500 can be a mass event like it's been in recent years. But we're just going to have to wait and see if that can happen. I'm not sure if that will happen, but I hope it does because I think the Daytona 500 is still a big event. But I still think there's ways to even make the event bigger than it currently is at the moment, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Road America. Now, over the course of the last couple of years, there's been a lot of talk and chatter surrounding the future of Road America. A lot of fans of NASCAR clamor for the return of Road America because, one, the attendance has always been really good at Road America, whether it was the NASCAR events or the IndyCar events that take place every single year at the track, or even the IMSA events that take place there. You can sometimes have crowds of over 100,000 people that show up to Road America because the track can put on some really, really good racing. For the long time, Road America had been on the NASCAR schedule. From about 2010 up until 2023, the Xfinity Series would end up racing at Road America. And for the NASCAR Cup Series, they ran there for 2 years. A big reason why they stopped going to Road America at the end of 2022 is so they could go to the Chicago Street Course because, of course, Road America is very close to the Chicago area, and NASCAR wanted to have a street race in Chicago starting in 2023. But there's been a lot of people wondering whether this track could return to the future in NASCAR. Well, earlier this week, I believe it was an account called Journal Sentinel that did a report on this, and they spoke on their NASCAR future, which is the people that are from the Road America area. They says, "We love to come back. It looks good here. I lobby all the time, but it's ultimately their choice on whether they want to return to Road America or not." Now, currently at the moment, the 2026 NASCAR schedule has not been officially announced, and we're probably not going to get the 2026 schedule until at least a little bit down the road. Historically, when it comes to schedule releases, we usually get them in the second half of the year. But from what Jordan Bianchi said very recently, there's probably not going to be a lot of changes to the schedule for 2026. Now, one track he did mention as a possibility is Chicagoland returning to the circuit, which if they were to go to Chicagoland, it could affect the opportunity to go to Road America because Chicagoland and Road America are very, very close together, and a lot of people from that Chicago and Joliet area are probably going to go up to Road America as well. Now, he did not talk about the possibility of it being on the Xfinity Series schedule. I would love to see Road America return. I think the Xfinity Series always put on a really good show. I think the event 2 years ago in 2023 was fantastic. The racing was really, really good. You had fantastic racing throughout the event. And in my opinion, you had an all-time classic finish at the end because, of course, there was a lot of oil dry out there thanks to Connor Mosack blowing up near the end of the race. But there's a lot of cars slipping and sliding. You had a lot of people making moves. And there's a lot of opportunities to make passes and get the opportunity to take the race lead and make the moves that you need to go out there and pick up the wins and victories. I think the racing product of Road America is really good. Now, obviously, the next-gen car doesn't put on the greatest racing on the road courses. I do think it has improved. That's one area of the next-gen car that I will say it has improved in. But I do think that generally Road America for the Xfinity Series was always good. Didn't matter what year. The first year was a fantastic race with a lot of chaos. 2011 was really, really good as well. And I think the track can put on a really good show. Now, one big complaint that comes up is the long cautions. I know there's a little bit of a short shoot they can use for the cautions to kind of shorten it up. And that's one reason I say let's not have the stage cautions for those road course races at Road America. I get they want to have them, but the cautions take so long at the road courses. So I do think if we have maybe like a shorter circuit just during the yellow flags, maybe you could do that. But I think Road America should be on the schedule. But the problem is a lot of races clamoring to be on the schedule. In the Xfinity Series, they have a lot of tracks on their circuit. Now, I've said this for the longest time. I think there should be at most tracks only one date. Because if you gave a lot of other tracks the opportunity to host a date, you took some dates that had 2 dates currently at the moment, like a Bristol, for example, like maybe a Martinsville, which I think is blasphemous to say, but like a Martinsville or something like that, or even like a Darlington, for example, you can give it to a track that could host a date. And Road America, in my opinion, deserves to be on the NASCAR schedule. I think it would put on an actual really good show and a very good product as well. Again, I've talked about the next-gen car. It's got its own issues that do need to be fixed, but I do want to see Road America get on the schedule in the future. I'd love to see it back on the schedule down the road. I think the track, like I said, puts on some fantastic and great racing, and I think it deserves to be on the schedule. I really hope it does come on the schedule. It deserves to be on the schedule once again. It's a shame they haven't gone back there the last couple of years. They don't race up in the Wisconsin area right now. They were in Milwaukee for a few years for the Craftsman Truck Series. They're not there this year for whatever reason. I just wish we were up in the Wisconsin area. The Midwest has a massive racing fan base, and Wisconsin has a massive racing culture as well that loves the Road America area. 100,000 people showed up. I get the ratings weren't that great on the Cup side, but I think that the track can put on some really great and fantastic racing. So I really hope that maybe like 26 or 2027 perhaps, we could see a return to the track. I think, again, this track absolutely 100% deserves to be on the NASCAR schedule. I hope it does happen. It's a great track. It's a great facility. The racing there is very, very good a lot of times, and I think it could put on a fantastic, great show if it gets that said chance and opportunity to be on the schedule. So we'll have to wait and see if it does come on the schedule in 2026 or 2027 or something like that, but I definitely want to see this track back on the NASCAR schedule because it deserves to be on the schedule going forward. I hope it does happen, and we'll see if it does happen going forward in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. Now, Connor Zilisch, of course, sat out this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway because, of course, he had suffered a back injury, which, of course, he made the decision. The doctors also made a decision for that to happen. The reason Connor Zilisch sat out for this weekend at Texas is because of what happened at Talladega Super Speedway. So on the white flag of the race, Connor Zilisch was controlling the outside lane and was making really good runs on the outside to get the race lead and got a great push from Jesse Love and Austin Hill. Going down the back straightaway, we had Jeb Burton on the inside trying to get the race lead. And then, of course, Burton lost a little bit of ground, and Connor got a great push. Now, going down the back straightaway, Jesse Love would try to make move on the inside of Connor Zilisch. They would go by side. Jesse tried to make the move. Connor tried to come down a little bit. There'd be some contact between both drivers. They go down the back straightaway. Connor Zilisch ends up spinning out really hard into the inside wall and gets a ton of damage. On the radio, he was complaining about his back hurting. NASCAR would throw the caution, and he was complaining about his back hurting, which, again, he said, ow, my back. It really, really hurts. He would then go to the infield care center. He actually said he felt fine after he got out of the infield care center, but he went to his doctors, and the doctors recommended that he should not race this weekend. Now, Connor, of course, did sit out, and Kyle Larson took over the car, and Kyle Larson was able to pick up the win in the Xfinity Series race, and Connor Zilisch got to be in victory lane. But he also kind of talked a little bit about the injury as well earlier in the week. He spoke a little bit about it. He does say that he is not rushing in to get back in the car currently at the moment. He's making the smart decision to go ahead and sit out for the race. But he also did not reveal a lot of information on that said injury, which I think is interesting. Now, I don't think Connor Zilisch knows as much about what exactly the injury that he received he had and what exactly it was. It could have been a hairline fracture on the back. We're not entirely sure. It could have been like a sprain or something like that. We don't entirely know at this point. Now, Connor Zilisch also did reveal in the same video that Bob Pockers put out, he does say that he hopes to be back at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Now, for the Xfinity Series, the good news for Connor Zilisch is, one, he has received the playoff waiver, so he is good to go for the rest of the season if he does have to miss more races. But the other big positive is the fact that he didn't just have this week at Texas Motor Speedway to sit out. He actually had a couple extra weeks to sit out because the Xfinity Series is not racing this weekend at Kansas Speedway, and he also is not racing in North Wilkesboro because North Wilkesboro does not have the Xfinity Series. It only has the Cup Series for the All-Star Race and the Truck Series for the Truck Series event at that racetrack. The next Xfinity Series event is at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Now, obviously, there are going to be some questions asked about whether if he is ready for Charlotte, if he is going to do the double, because remember, Connor Zilisch is supposed to make his NASCAR Oval debut in the Cup Series at the Coco 600 this year, driving the 87 car for Trackhouse Racing. Now, I think there's a chance he could be better, but I think what Connor's doing here is definitely taking his time. Now, I think there is a very good chance and possibility, though, that he is going to return at Charlotte Motor Speedway. I think that he'll be back as he wants to be back behind the wheel. Again, like I mentioned, he doesn't want to rush back in behind the wheel of a race car because back injuries can be very, very serious. Think about other drivers. Alex Bowman, he suffered a back injury in a sprint car accident in Lawrenceburg, Kansas 2 years ago, and he ended up missing for about 4 or 5 weeks, and it never really was the same through 2023. Eric Jones, he missed 2 races due to back injury at Talladega Super Speedway. Eric Jones also kind of talked to Connor on the phone. Connor actually called Eric about and kind of gave him a little bit of advice about what to do. You think about Denny Hamlin. 12 years ago at Auto Club, he was battling down for the win, broke his back in a crash, and sat out for almost 10 or 11 races, if I remember correctly, and never really was the same until the end of the year where he won at Homestead Miami Speedway. I think Connor, he needs to take his time to get back behind the wheel because I think Connor Zilisch is someone who is very, very talented, and I think he does have a ton of potential to be one of the most successful drivers in the sport ever. He's already won 2 NASCAR Xfinity Series races, and get this, he's only 18 years old, so he has so much time in his career. I just don't want him to get basically back out there and feel like he's hurting quite a bit. He does say that he's going to probably change his seat inserts and probably go to Junior Motorsports' headquarters this week and probably try to figure out maybe some new seat inserts that he could have during the time while he tries to heal up, which I think that'd be very smart as well. It seems like Connor is fine in a sense from where you can listen to the video, but he probably still has a little bit of pain as well. So at this point for Connor, he just needs to take it very, very cautiously and needs to do what he can to get as healthy as possible. But I hope he does return to the racetrack very, very soon. I'm hoping for a speedy recovery. And on a big positive note, Kyle Larson, who's someone I think that mentors Connor a little bit, he did go to victory lane for Connor, but he didn't win the Cup Series race, unfortunately, which sucked because Larson probably should have won, but I digress. Anyways, for Connor Zilisch, I think the most important thing is to get healthy. He wants to compete for a championship this year. He's been really solid. I know there's been some inconsistencies when it comes to results, but I think Conor's been doing a very, very good job this year. I think he does have a good chance and opportunity to win the championship this year. He's been good at Phoenix before. He's been really good at the Mile High especially, and we know he's a fantastic road course racer. So I hope he can get held up very, very soon so he can be back on the racetrack because I want to see Conor race again. He's a very, very good driver, and he deserves to be in the seat. He's been really good with Junior Motorsports. Trackhouse is really, really helping. There's also that big conversation about the potential possibility of him being full-time in the Cup Series next year. We know Daniel Suarez is in a contract year with Trackhouse currently at the moment. There's a lot of talk about that right now. So I do think for Conor, he wants to go out there and prove everybody that he can do what he needs, even if he does have, unfortunately, an injury. So I hope he can do what he can to get as healthy as possible. I hope he can get back behind the wheel of a race car very, very soon because I think he deserves to be behind the wheel of a car. We'll see what ends up happening and see when he does get cleared. I do expect Conor will be cleared very, very soon to get back behind the wheel of a car. We'll see what happens in the near future. But again, I do think he will be good to go to get back behind the wheel of a race car soon. Hope it does happen because I think Conor's a really, really good driver. We'll just have to wait and see when the doctors clear him and when NASCAR does approve him to go ahead and go through because I think he needs to take his time. He wants to be in the sport, be successful, but again, like I've mentioned, he needs to do what he can to try to be as successful as possible because I do think that he's someone who does have a lot of potential to be a great driver in the sport. I think he's the best prospect out there, maybe outside of Cory right now, and I think that he doesn't want to screw that up. So the most important thing, take care of your health, take care of your safety. That's going to be the most important thing for Conor going forward so he can get back behind the wheel in a very safe manner going forward. So, that is going to be today's breaking news and full NASCAR news video on the channel. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and combo your thoughts below on today's episode. What are thoughts about Conor, Zilisch, and whether he might return to Charlotte? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are thoughts about the other stories we talk about today on the channel, including the stories around some stuff like the Daytona 500 and also Road America as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I've got a second news video that's going to be dropping a little bit later in the morning. We'll talk about some other stuff like Casey Kane. We're going to spend some time talking about the Chris Wright incident, the incident between Ryan Prix and Carson Nosbar as well, and some other news we've talked about. If there's any other major news that does break later today, we'll discuss it live on the channel. Tomorrow, we're probably going to have the interest for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Kansas. We also will probably have the Truck Series race picks for Kansas as well. If there's not enough news on Wednesday, we'll probably do the Cup race picks for Kansas. I'm going to do a silly season update this week as well, so expect that to come on the channel very soon as well as we discuss some of the big silly season stories coming around. We'll talk about people like Kyle Busch, Connor Zilisch, Carson Quaffle, Junior Motorsports, Cletus Afaro, Matt Benedetto, Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Cards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, other people in the industry like Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, and Bubba Wallace as well. And again, Cletus Afaro too, and Eric Almirola, and Prime KSI, Logan Paul, and all that good stuff. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.